Hey, it's Mark Bergin from the Browns Nation Station. The listeners of the Browns Nation Station can show their Browns Nation pride by going to brownsnation.com. The site has all the latest and best fan gear to represent your team. Again, that's brownsnationswag.com. Cue the music. It's time to start the show. Welcome to the Browns Nation Station. I'm your host, Mark Bergin. Today, joined by fellow brownsnation.com colleague Steven Kubitza. Steven, recording this after the Browns' 22-17 victory over the Philadelphia Eagles. The Browns 7-3 for the first time since 1989. And I tell you what, my takeaway from this game is two things, Steven. One, winning the turnover battle. And then number two, Nick Chubb doing his best beast mode impersonation. What a game for the Browns, 7-3, headed into next weekend's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, another sloppy game, terrible conditions. This just seems like every time the Browns play, that's going to be the weather. But yeah, with Nick Chubb, it seems like every week now, you look at him and be like, oh, he's only got around 50 yards at this point, and then he just busts off a run. That's insane. He had his awesome stiff arm. He was hurdling people, as was Kareem Hunt. So it's just fun to watch. It's a simple way to describe it, but it's just fun.
And it's like with the Browns running back, it's like, you can do one thing, I can do better. So Chubb rips off that huge 50-plus yard run where he had the stiff arm, where he sends the Eagles defender into a different time zone. 2 plays later, Kareem Hunt hurdles a defender, punches it into the end zone, and it just shows you the importance of running the football as we get later and later and later into the season. And especially with Baker Mayfield's play, where you just look at the stat sheet and nothing really pops off of it. 12 of 22, 204 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Winning the turnover battle was key in this one. The Browns had 3 takeaways to the Eagles 1. I thought that was huge in this game. He had the fumble forced by Fletcher Cox earlier in the game. But look, I don't think on TV, with the sideline camera, I don't think it always shows the conditions of what it's like on the playing field and how that makes it difficult. But Cleveland embracing this role, this 2-back tandem of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, relying on the offensive line. And look, you use the elements to your advantage, and that's what the Browns have done the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I agree with you that you're not really getting the true sense of what it is like on the field. But if the strategy is to give it to 2 Pro Bowl running backs, I think everyone's going to be fine with that. And the funny thing too, if you're just looking at the stat sheet, is Kareem Hunt carrying it 13 times for 11 yards, had his touchdown. He just had to just get back into the positive range there. But you definitely have to be watching the games with this team, especially with Baker, like you said, to get the full sense of what's going on, kind of the flow of the game. And once again, back to your original point, winning the turnover battle with Myles Garrett out, can't, stress, enough how important that was.
100%. So the 2 plays that really stuck out to me, Steven, were Chubb's long run, which set up the Browns touchdown 2 plays later to Kareem Hunt, but then also in the second quarter. And this was Sione Takitaki's pick 6, which was set up by Denzel Ward's blitz off the edge. He disrupted the pass thrown by Carson Wentz. He held on to the ball too long, something we'll get into here in just a second. But Takitaki takes the pick, the interception, and runs it back for a touchdown. And I thought that those 2 plays were key in the Browns' victory this afternoon.
Oh, yeah. The Takitaki pick 6 was awesome to watch at home. You could kind of see it coming. Carson Wentz, I don't know what's wrong with him. He looked really bad and kind of proved Paul De Podesta correct when he famously said, when Carson Wentz was coming out in the draft, that Carson Wentz is not an elite quarterback in the NFL. He got a lot of blowback for that, and it kind of looks like he was right, because you think what would he have done in Cleveland with that Hugh Jackson team? But that's a whole other thing to get into. But yeah, that Denzel Ward played out of his mind today. And I didn't understand why they kept going at him. Obviously, the pick 6 was a blitz he did. But in general, with his coverage all day, he was, dominating. And they just kept forcing it to him in the rain. It made no sense. I'm happy with the result. But yeah, both of those plays were exciting. And I mean, there's highlights of them all over Twitter right now. There's GIFs of Nick Chubb's huge stiff arm. So definitely a lot of fun storylines.
I can't wait to see all of the different tweets and memes and everything that result out of that. Again, my impersonation, it was like he was doing the beast mode Marshawn Lynch impersonation on that run, and it just shows you how hard it is to bring him down in open space in the open field. And going into this game, one of my big questions for the Browns was, okay, Myles Garrett is out on the COVID-19 list. Hopefully the Browns can get him back next week against the Jaguars. But who is going to be that guy from a defensive standpoint that steps up for this Browns team and makes a play? And so you had the pick six. You had Olivier Vernon, who had 3 sacks this afternoon. He finally showed up. Who knew that you would have to take Garrett off the field and that would be enough for Vernon to step up? A guy who, look, the Browns have always wanted to pair him the opposite side of Myles Garrett, and then you'd have that tandem of Garrett and Vernon. For whatever reason, Vernon just hasn't produced in a Browns uniform. I would not expect Vernon to be back as a Cleveland Brown beyond this season, but he finally showed flashes of what the Browns saw him in the first place in bringing him to Cleveland from the New York Giants. And he finally showed up today. I'll say this, I don't think he's always been 100% healthy. He hasn't always had that burst off the ball from what we've seen in his career, but he finally showed up today for Cleveland.
Yeah, the only way he's coming back is if, he takes a huge pay cut. But yeah, it was his game today. And then even we had some Adrian Claiborne sightings. He had 1.5 sacks on the day too. So, we talk about all the additions made on defense. And apparently, like you said, it takes Myles Garrett being out for everyone else to show up. But it was just really good to see Vernon. He, has been kind of hated on by fans. He gets paid so much money. And today showed that even against a weak offensive line, maybe he'll build some confidence. And if he's healthy again, once Garrett is back with Claiborne playing the way he did too, this is maybe the defensive line we've all been waiting to see. That's not so top heavy with Myles Garrett.
I would have wanted to see this Cleveland defense really finish it out and not allow the Eagles to score at the end of the game. And certainly the Browns recover an onside kick and they end up winning by 5. And so I just would have liked to see where it's like when you have a team down, keep them down. And when you have a big lead, take them out to deep water and drown them. You have to have that killer instinct if you want to succeed late in the season and as a potential playoff team. And it's incredible going into this one that the Eagles entering the game at 3-5-1 still led the NFC East or the NFC least division heading into this game. And so I do want to get a little bit into Carson Wentz. And here was kind of my takeaway from what I saw this afternoon. He kind of has the yips where he second guesses himself and double pats the ball and clutches the ball and the timing is not there. And so, okay, why is that? I think part of it is, okay, his receivers aren't creating the separation that he needs to get the ball out quickly in an effective manner. I think that is certainly one thing. So if there's nothing there downfield, what really can he do? But then you also face the fact that this Eagles line is pretty banged up. Lane Johnson is out. Center Jason Kelce is banged up. He had an elbow brace on in the second half, and so he wasn't quite 100%. Jason Peters, who's a multiple-time Pro Bowl player, is 38 years old at this point in his career. And it's tough for Wentz because, there's times he holds on to the ball too long. But at the same time, I don't think it's all on him. And there's a reason why he's the most sacked quarterback in the league 39 times so far this season. And that's the most in his career. And we still have several games left in the season. And so I watched this game and it's like Wentz almost has to play this hero ball style for the Eagles to even stand a chance just because he has limited weapons around him. And this team is so just up and down. It was just evident to me today of whatever NFC East team ends up making the playoffs, they're going to be one and done. They are going to get run in the first round of the playoffs. And it's just amazing to me. You look at this Eagles team, they're the NFC East best team so far this season. I do want to say one other thing about Wentz too. I certainly think that he misses John DeFilippo, his former quarterback coach, and then Frank Reich, who is now the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. He was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles back in the day. Wentz was a guy in 2017 playing at an MVP level, 11-2 before he got injured. Nick Foles takes over and ends up winning the Super Bowl with this Eagles team just a few years ago. And so he's shown that in this league, he can play on the mountaintop. But when you're not playing on the mountaintop, and that's the expectation, especially in Philly, you're going to hear it from the fans. And that's what you saw yet again this afternoon is Carson Wentz and this Eagles offense struggled mightily.
Yeah, with Wentz, it's weird. I was reading about it during the week about how, he entered this Browns game with 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. He leaves with 14 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. And it's the question of, we see the offensive line, we see the lack of talent around him, but, what's really, is there like a major issue? And one theory I kind of agree with is that, Doug Peterson showed up and he had a star staff around him. He was an Andy Reid disciple. And now all the star staff got hired out, which is what happens like with Bill Belichick's staffs and Andy Reid's. But Doug Peterson's just not at that level to be this QB guru with Carson Wentz. So maybe he loses all those coaches, day-to-day stuff completely changes, and Doug Peterson's just kind of riding off that Super Bowl reputation, even though it's because Nick Foles played out of his mind in that postseason and basically had a shootout with Tom Brady. So there's so many factors. Clearly the blocking is awful. Zach Ertz is out. Alshon Jeffrey had one target today. So all the money that they're spending is not being utilized properly. And like you said, the hero ball thing, like last year when all the receivers were hurt, Greg Ward was out there. They were throwing the running backs all the time. And Carson Wentz had to carry them just to be competitive. And the conditions were bad today. The Browns defense is no pushover. It's no joke. So, I mean, if you can hit him a few times and his receivers aren't doing anything, the coaching is not going to pull him out of that hole. So they're still riding their reputation of the Super Bowl win, which rightfully they should. But they have a lot of major problems that just getting into the playoffs with 5 wins or something is not going to change anything.
And if you think we're being overly critical of, okay, Frank Reich, the former offensive coordinator, now the head coach of the Colts, and then John DeFilippo, I believe, is now the quarterback's coach of the Chicago Bears. If you think we're being overly critical of, okay, who are these assistant coaches? Does that really matter in this league? If you talk to any current former NFL player, coach in the league that knows what it's like in a locker room, they will tell you a quarterback spends more time with a quarterback's coach or an offensive coordinator than they do a head coach. And I think that's probably especially true given the circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges that presents this season. So if it's, okay, why are you guys focusing on something that happened several years ago? That's the reason why, just because, yeah, Doug Peterson's going to get a lot of the attention as the head coach, but a quarterback actually spends more time with an offensive coordinator and a quarterback's coach. And in some organizations, those positions are one and the same. Some guys fulfill both roles for some organizations in this league.
I mean, just look to the Browns last year with Baker, that Ryan Lindley was 30 years old. He was the quarterback's coach, didn't seem to really have much of a clue of how to work well with him. And Freddie Kitchens was a disaster as well. So you switch in this year, you have Kevin Stefanski leading the ship, and Baker appears to be more confident. He's playing solid in terrible weather. So the coaching is huge, and Carson Wentz, did get drafted so high with that pick the Browns could have used on him, that number 2 pick a few years ago. But I just can't look past the coaching here. And the Browns, I think any Browns fan can agree with that. And even if Eagles fans seem lost, it's, look, you take all these voices out of the room. Like you said, they're spending all their time with this person. If it's a coach they don't get along with, or if it's a Ryan Lindley situation where maybe he's too young and doesn't really have the coach mentality down, you're going to suffer on the field. And it seems to be something that should be obvious, but football coaches and teams are often stubborn and may try to just be like, oh, that's not a problem, and just kind of argue through it. But it's going to take a lot of analysis there, because Carson Wentz is making a lot of money. They just drafted Jalen Hurts, who they're basically throwing on the field to get injured in those, the same way Mitch Trubisky got injured in Chicago, just running the ball. So they have to really take a deep dive. And even if they make the playoffs and let's say they go crazy and get a win, it's not going to change anything. They have to make a decision on Wentz.
Yeah, and remember, Hurts is the backup too. So I know they used him almost as a gadget quarterback this afternoon, and they've done that in previous games. But you can't get your backup hurt, especially if Wentz is getting sacked as many times as he is. Again, 39 after today's game. I am happy you mentioned Baker Mayfield and his relationship with the coaching staff. I do think the Browns left points on the board today in Baker Mayfield overthrowing Austin Hooper in the first quarter. It was on the Browns' second drive of the game. It was actually on two different passes. On one of them, there was a defensive pass interference. But then there was another one where it's like if Baker puts the ball on the money, you're talking about 7 points there. And the Browns go for it on fourth down, and they had Kareem Hunt run the ball. He got stopped short. That was pretty interesting that they used Hunt in that situation and not Chubb. Chubb, I think, a little bit more of a power running back. But they did say on the sidelines, one of the sidelines reporters said that Chubb lost his contact at some point in the game, which again goes back to the conditions of this one of, okay, it's not pristine indoor conditions or conditions that you see early on in the season where, you've got where weather's not a factor. That clearly was a factor in this one. So maybe that's the reason why Mayfield misses that throw. But between that throw and then Cody Parkey had a field goal blocked today too. I am glad he played because he potentially could have been out. He was on the COVID-19 list earlier this week, but you're talking about what could have been a close game being without Myles Garrett. But I do think that the Browns left points off the scoreboard in this one that could have potentially cost them. It didn't, but I think the Browns could have won by more than 5 points in this one is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, that Mayfield overthrow in the end zone was concerning, but like you said, maybe it's weather related. Or also, it looked like he did have pressure in his face. He was trying to kind of lob it over. There was also a defender by Hooper, so a line drive throw would have been either knocked down or potentially intercepted. But, I mean, he was able to bounce back in the weather and make some good throws. So when you see one miss like that, you kind of wonder, what the heck is going on? How is he missing that poorly if he's able to throw a strike to Rashard Higgins, across the field in the rain? And as for leaving points on the board, it's something that when you win, it's almost you can just forget about it. Say, oh, well, they only won by 5 because the Eagles had a late score. It's no, they left a lot of points on the board. The beginning of the game was both teams driving as close as possible to the end zone and not scoring a touchdown. And it kind of shows you the difference between a team maybe like the Chiefs and then a team like the Browns and then down to the Eagles. So different tiers there of talent. Once again, with a win, you can move past it, but they do need to, maybe work on their goal line attack, because if you leave points on the board against a team like the Titans or the Steelers, it's going to hurt you right away.
100%. I want to get into good call, bad call, and the two bad calls, two things. Number one, Rashard Higgins early on in the game, this was in the second quarter, got tangled up with Darius Slay, and they did not call a pass interference penalty. This is a scenario where I think that having OBJ on the field, potentially you get that call in your favor, just given his prestige in this league. Rashard Higgins going up against Darius Slay, who I believe is a Pro Bowl cornerback in his own right. They kind of just let it go. They didn't call pass interference, and the Browns end up giving up the ball. They end up having to punt. And then also the booth review on what appeared to be an interception by Mack Wilson late in the game ends up getting overturned, and the Eagles end up kicking a field goal instead. I thought that was questionable too, and it was hard to tell, I'll say that. But my bad call would probably lean towards, if there's any kind of contact downfield, throw the flag. And especially in a league where it's dominated by offenses, I think that was just one of those ones where it's like, Hollywood Higgins is a young receiver and he's not going to get this call. Whereas I think OBJ maybe does, because he would be the guy in that role if he were healthy.
Yeah, I agree with that. Watching that, it's one of those calls where if that's not pass interference, then there's no such thing as pass interference. It's in the name of the rule. He prevented him from catching the ball, making an attempt. So you see calls week to week. It's just too inconsistent, which I think has been a forever problem with NFL officiating. No one's quite sure of what the rule is. So I agree that's the bad call. For Mac Wilson's one, I thought, it was obviously close. Call on the field was a pick, I believe. And I thought that based on the review, it looked like it hit the ground. So I would definitely lean more toward Rashard Higgins. And for another bad call, if we're talking about the Eagles, Carson Wentz's late interception where he just lobbed it up and got picked by Denzel Ward was just, you're down close trying to score. Like you just can't do that. They were able to get the ball back, make it close, make an attempt, but it was similar to what I saw with Tom Brady against the New Orleans Saints a few weeks back. He was just making throws that me or you would make and not, someone who's making all that money. So he's going to have a painful time watching the tape. And with the officiating, I think I've grown used to it by now, and most fans have. But if they're not going to call, or to your point, if they call that on OBJ but not for Higgins, then what's the point of having the rule in the first place?
Exactly. And here's the thing with Wentz. Why is he targeting Denzel Ward, a guy who's a Pro Bowl or potential Pro Bowl cornerback, one of the best young emerging cornerbacks in the league, when, okay, why wouldn't you instead try to target Terrence Mitchell on the other side, a guy filling in for Greedy Williams? And then Ronnie Harrison goes down with an injury earlier in this game. Carl Joseph fills in. Why wouldn't you target and go after the guys who aren't even starters on this Browns team? And I don't know if that's okay. Carson Wentz has played at that MVP level and he thinks that he can complete passes against anyone. But from just a basic schematic standpoint, and if I'm the Eagles offensive coordinator and the one calling plays, I'm going away from Denzel Ward, not toward him.
Yeah, that seems to be just either lack of common sense or just lack of preparation, because it's not like Julio Jones is their number one receiver. He's not going against Denzel Ward. It's a bunch of backups essentially, and Alshon Jeffrey, who's barely involved. So I think it's kind of stubbornness too, and saying, well, this isn't our game plan. We're targeting our top receiver. If Denzel Ward's on him, too bad. Which is great news for opposing defenses, because usually if you have a top corner that good, you're going to come out the victor in the situation. So I think it just goes back to maybe Doug Peterson trying to be more than what he is and pretending like his 3.5 win team is, undefeated. It makes no logical sense, but you see it all the time in the NFL.
A couple of other things I wanted to get to. We mentioned the importance of the turnover battle. I knew this was going to be a line of scrimmage game coming into it, especially with Myles Garrett out. Jack Conklin did play, another guy who was on the COVID-19 list at the start of the week. He was reactivated to the active roster, so he played. And so a key in this one, I thought, was time of possession. Again, the Browns had the ball for almost 32 minutes in this one. And one of the matchups I was really excited to watch in this one was the interior line matchup of Browns right guard Wyatt Teller, one of the best young guards in the National Football League, going up against Fletcher Cox, the all-pro defensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Cox was the one who forced the Browns' only turnover. It was a strip sack of Baker Mayfield. And then just a play later, the Eagles get on the board for the first time in this one, and Wentz found Richard Rodgers for a touchdown in the third quarter. And so at that point, it's just like, oh man, have the Eagles figured something out? That is really interesting. The Browns go into half up 7-0. And this was the first NFL game this season in the entire league that did not see any offensive points in the first half. And so again, I go back to the weather conditions and the importance of that. If you're just watching this game from the sidelines and you're not cognizant of the rain that's coming down, this really played a factor this afternoon. Again, the Browns kind of figure things out in the second half, but they get 9 defensive points in 13 offensive points, and that proved to be the difference in this one.
Yeah, you look at the scores of the past 3 Browns games. They lost 16-6. They win 10-7. Then they win 22-17. And these conditions were arguably the best of those 3 games because there was no swirling winds or hail coming down sideways. So it's it's weird. It's a weird season, and the Browns truly do have maybe it's not even a home field advantage, but just a home field reality that the weather is going to be awful. Next game, they're at Jacksonville, so it should be nice there. And maybe by then, we can get back to seeing the normal Browns offense where they were putting up 30 points a game against bad teams. But, I mean, you should do that against bad teams. So it's basically a month of November where we may have seen a very limited version of the Browns offense, but in a good way, it's allowed them to focus on the running game. So, I mean, I live close to the stadium, relatively close. I saw the weather today. I said, oh, it's going to be just like last week. The difference was you were able to throw the ball today because the wind wasn't swirling as much. So I guess, when the conditions are bad in Cleveland, you have to break it down by how bad.
Yeah, upper 30s and rain at First Energy Stadium in Cleveland this afternoon. Embrace that though. Like to me, it's like you've got Chubb and Hunt, two of the top 10 running backs in this league. In my opinion, the best running back duo in the NFL. You've got a blue collar mentality in the city of Cleveland. Like embrace that. Like that's what I would do. And I think Kevin Stefanski has with his propensity to run the football, use multiple tight end sets. And it's like, okay, if David Njoku, or I know OBJ's out, if they're ever upset that they're not getting the football, like the fact of the matter is if you're scoring together as a team, it's about what we're doing collectively together. We can all go celebrate in the end zone. It's not about what I'm doing, me individually.
Yeah, and today you had 3 receptions from Kadero Hodge, leading the way with 73 yards. Then Higgins had 3. Jarvis Landry only had 2. You're not going to see him complaining. So they win the game. It's once you step on the field, it's going to be bad out there. It's going to be tough to throw and catch the ball. So I totally agree. If the formula is working, Stefanski's figured it out. I mean, you move past the fact Kareem Hunt only had 11 rushing yards on the day in the final analysis because he had some huge losses that weren't necessarily his fault. I think they should embrace it, and it looks like they did. The first bad weather game against the Raiders, they weren't as prepared, but that weather was just awful, even to be dangerous to be outside. So I'm liking it. They're winning, which is good. If they're losing in this weather, then you would really ask, are they even capable of playing as a quote unquote AFC North team in this weather? So for once, we can look at the weather, see how they win the game in, a grueling manner, and embrace the fact of the cold weather teams having that advantage.
I've got to give a shout out to rookie Jordan Elliott for forcing the fumble on the Eagles' opening drive, and Carl Joseph filling in for Ronnie Harrison recovered it down on the goal line. I thought that was a key in this one, and what ended up being a 5-point game. And you talk about a potential 7-point swing if the Eagles actually do go down and punch it in and score. And so I thought that was a huge difference maker in this one too. But looking at the schedule ahead, you've got Jacksonville, Tennessee, Baltimore, your next 3 games, especially on the road in Jacksonville. You'd certainly expect the weather to be better down in Florida this time of year. And so this would potentially be more of a get-right game for Baker Mayfield and this passing attack. I did like to see that the Browns finally got Austin Hooper involved a little bit. He had 3 receptions on the day as well. He's coming off that appendectomy injury as well. So I'd like to see them get him more and more involved in this offense as teams start to stack the box. What's your counter for the Browns? And that's really the big question that I have for them moving forward is, okay, you got this great running back tandem. What happens when opposing defenses take that away? What counter do you have, whether it's a play action, whether it's a trick gadget play that we saw this afternoon with Jarvis Landry on that option play, which was fun to watch, which converted a first down? What are the things that you're going to do when, okay, the defense takes away your strength? What's your counter? How are you able to still be effective? And I think you're going to see that with Baker Mayfield. And he did have the fumble today, which was the Browns' only turnover, but it just goes to show you the importance of taking care of the football and playing complementary football. And that was a huge difference in today's game. And if that would have been similar, if the Eagles take care of the football, I think potentially you're talking about a different result in this afternoon's game. I really believe that.
And to build on one point you made, getting Hooper involved is very important, because it's not really looking like David Njoku is going to be much of a difference maker at all. He had 0 catches today, which was tough. There's only 12 completions, but only 1 target. He appeared to miss a block pretty poorly, and I believe a play where Baker got hit, but I can't remember exactly. I just remember seeing Njoku flailing on the ground, essentially. But he asked to be traded. They said either they got nothing in return in terms of offers, or they just decided to keep him and tell him, deal with it. We're keeping you. But he's clearly not the top tight end, and Harrison Bryant's arguably the second tight end. So getting Hooper involved can maybe add some structure to that and make him more of a favorite target for Baker. And that's what they're paying him to be. So it's good to see that happen, especially in the weather.
And he's a 2-time Pro Bowler as well when he was in Atlanta before coming over to Cleveland. So this is a guy who's been among the elite tight ends in the league. And so, okay, if you're going to pay him all that money, utilize him. And again, I know Stefanski likes to use multiple tight end sets, but if Njoku's not happy about it, look, at the end of the day, you might not be putting up the fantasy stats that you would like to, or getting the targets and the receptions that you would like to. You're 7-3 for the first time in a long time in Cleveland. And this city's been looking for a winner. So that goes back to, it's about what we're doing. It's not about what I'm doing individually. Maybe he feels that that's limiting his ability to make more money and get that second contract beyond his rookie deal. But it's about what's best for the team. And I commend Kevin Stefanski as this team's play caller in feeding Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. He's done a great job of getting both of those guys involved. And that is the difference in this team. And this was always the debate with OBJ was, oh, we've got to get Beckham the ball. He's a game breaker. He's a difference maker. Certainly you see that in the Dallas game earlier this year. They don't win the Cowboys game without his efforts. But there's no correlation of, oh, if OBJ has 100 yards, his teams tend to win. And in fact, the opposite is true. In games where OBJ has 100 yards receiving, his teams have a losing record. And so, look, and that's not all on him. A lot of it's the circumstances, the ebb and flow of games. But at the end of the day, it's about winning and losing. And I know a lot of critics out there have been critical of Baker Mayfield, and I still think that's really the big question surrounding this season, with Andrew Berry in the front office wondering whether it's worth it to pick up his 5th-year option. It's going to cost about $25 to $26 million to do that, to pick up the 5th-year option on his rookie deal. But you have to evaluate that. He's in his 3rd year with his 4th different head coach, and you see what continuity does for organizations with the quarterback position, the head coaching position, general manager, and ownership. And those 4 roles with a stability standpoint is something Cleveland has lacked for the last 20 years. Mayfield was the first Browns quarterback a season ago to start all 16 games since Tim Couch back in the day. And so if you want to just have this quarterback carousel with the Browns, if you don't decide to pick up his 5th-year rookie option, what are you going to do? And I know earlier this year, turnovers were a problem with Mayfield. And they're clamoring for bringing Case Keenum. He had success with Stefanski in 2017. Case Keenum's 32 years old. He's on his 6th different NFL team in 9 seasons. It's the definition of a journeyman quarterback. You have to see what you have in an asset with Baker Mayfield as the number 1 overall pick in the 2018 draft. And if he can lead the Browns to the playoffs for the first time since 2002 and potentially a playoff win, you've got to take a long look in the mirror and say, if this isn't who we're looking for, what are we looking for? And kind of the comparison I would make is a season ago, the 49ers go to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, and now the 49ers fans want to run him out of town. How many people would love to be in line for a chance to win the Super Bowl? Now, there's a lot of time between now and the Super Bowl with this Browns team, but you got to get in the dance before you can say, hey, can we compete? Can we win a playoff game? Could we make an AFC championship game? Could we win a Super Bowl? You've got to make it there first, and the Browns have not done that since 2002, and that's what the Browns need to evaluate this season. So it's not just the individual stats, but what do you have to do on a game in and game out basis? And look, I don't think Mayfield's quite played up to being the number one overall pick, but the fact that the Browns stand 7-3, how many Browns fans would have taken that at the season start? And I think he's done a great job, and I think Kevin Stefanski's done a great job in figuring out what this team needs to do to have success this season.
Yeah, with the Baker conversation, I see no reason why they wouldn't pick up his option at this point. And like you said, if this isn't what you're looking for, what is? And there's also this fake belief that Browns fans have had for so long. It's, well, the next, we have to tank for this next guy because he's going to be better. We have to get Trevor Lawrence. We have to get this. It's not all these top picks are coming out and dominating. And that should be known by now. The Browns have had a lot of failed first-round quarterbacks. So if he's winning, he's not doing anything to actively make you lose. He's a top 20 quarterback at least. Why are you moving on? It wouldn't be a financial reason. They have the space. They've planned for 5 years to have this cap space for a franchise quarterback and for Myles Garrett. So it would be an uncharacteristic move for this front office to do that. Not for the Browns in general, but for this front office. So I'd be shocked if they really tried to run him out of town or anything at this point. And yeah, if he even getting to the playoffs at this point is huge. Browns fans can't act like, well, let's say Baker gets there and then loses. Okay, well, Lamar Jackson has done that. Are they running him out of Baltimore? No, they're understanding that he's young and you have to gain experience and get better. Not everyone's going to be Tom Brady. And it doesn't seem like something you should have to explain, but it is. And I see no reason now. You took him number one. You decided to essentially plan your whole future around him. You can't just cut him loose and say, well, we'll just get the next guy, because it could work, but then you just restart the process and it never ends.
And what's the median salary of an NFL quarterback in this league, of a starting NFL quarterback in this league? I can tell you this right now. It's north of $20 million. It is. So it goes back to, what are we talking about here? And if you don't pick up Mayfield's fifth-year rookie option, which again, I think would be smart at this point, because it'd be only 1 year, wouldn't necessarily have to be, okay, let's give Baker the long-term extension where he'll make more than $100 million over the span of several years. But if you're not going to pick up that fifth-year rookie deal, that fifth-year option on his rookie deal, what's your alternative? Whether that's building through the draft or free agency, and you better have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, because you might not get the first guy that you want who could potentially replace Baker Mayfield. And that's something that this front office has to evaluate. But it goes back to, look at all the best organizations in this league: Seattle, New England, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Green Bay. They all have continuity and stability at quarterback, at head coach, at general manager, with ownership. Every single one of those. And so the Browns, it's just been this carousel year after year after year after year. And I think they finally found a guy in Kevin Stefanski, who is a first-year head coach. His biggest bonehead mistake was running a fake punt against Baltimore, and that game was so out of hand it didn't even matter. But I think they might have found a guy who's a really, really good head coach, at least from what we've seen thus far through 10 games. And so how can you develop stability at those four positions within an organization? Because the Browns have not done that for the past 20 years, really since they came back into existence in the late 90s.
Yeah, and there's always this argument for bad teams of fans saying, well, the goal should be to win a Super Bowl. And it's, well, every team wants to win a Super Bowl. There's 32 teams, so basic math shows that you can go 31 years, 32 years, your team's never going to win. You factor in repeat champs. So if you say, well, Baker's not good enough to win a Super Bowl, That's first off, no one knows that. Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. Much worse quarterbacks have taken teams and won to the Super Bowl and won them. So, I mean, if you're getting stable play and stable coaching, that's all you can ask for at this point. And I mean, yes, the goal is to win a Super Bowl, but if there's this argument of, well, what if we give Baker a 5-year deal and, he's average? Well, what's the alternative? Taking a rookie and waiting for that third year to see how good he is? It's a losing mentality, and it is nice to see Kevin Stefanski kind of running the team professionally, properly. There's zero drama with him. And like you said, his one mistake was in a blowout loss, and it was his first game. So you move past it. He looks to be which is weird, a legitimate head coach for the Browns. First one since Bill Belichick. And it's nice to follow. It's nice to write about the Browns and podcasts about the Browns without talking about drama or nonsense.
And here's the thing, too. If the Browns do decide to extend Mayfield and give him a multi-year extension beyond his rookie year, so he would get that second contract, the thing to focus on would be, okay, what's the guaranteed number that he would get from said contract? Because it might be, say, a 5-year deal, but if the money is only guaranteed for 3 years, remember, that's what makes the NFL different from other professional sports leagues in the sense that the contracts aren't guaranteed. So it might be a 5-year deal, but if things did go south, if you gave Mayfield a huge extension and it didn't work out and he didn't play well, you might only be stuck with him for a few years. It wouldn't necessarily be the full length of that contract because the contracts aren't guaranteed in the NFL.
Yeah, it could be like, in a way, the same language as in Patrick Mahomes' contract. They say, we gave him a $500 million deal. Well, they're likely going to get out of that after 4 or 5 years and give him a new deal based on how he's playing at the time. So with Baker's deal, and he's going to get a lot of money. It's any quarterback you want to be your franchise quarterback is going to get insane money. That's just the market of the NFL. So complaining about that figure is saying, well, what is, look at what Dak Prescott's asking for. And it's just what it's going to be. Carson Wentz is getting paid a ton of money and looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL at this point in time. So you're going to pay him, like you said, he's going to get his guaranteed money up front at signing. The first year is going to be a ton of income for him. And then after that, it's going to be like Odell Beckham's deal too, where it's, okay, we can keep you for $28 to $30 million a year, but there's a zero dead cap value. So he can be cut at any point in time, in the offseason, and it doesn't hurt the team financially. So you say, hey, here's 5 years, like you said, but it's not really 5 years. And because if he is playing well, they're going to give him an extension and change the deal anyway.
After today's win, the Browns now are second in the AFC North. So the Steelers beat the Jaguars to improve to 10-0. The Steelers remain the NFL's only unbeaten team. The Browns improved to 7-3. The Ravens actually lost in overtime to the Titans. And then the Bengals lost to the Washington football team. Saw Joe Burrow got carted off the field with a leg injury. Certainly wish him the best in the sense that he's been a really exciting young quarterback. But the Browns now second in the AFC North, which again, if you would have told me at the start of the year, I would have been like, I thought 2020 was a crazy year for a variety of other reasons, but the Browns are 7-3 and putting themselves in a position to talk playoffs. And like how exciting that is for the Browns, because like I go back to the NFL's longest active playoff drought, the second longest active playoff drought in North American professional sports. Only the Mariners have a longer drought by a year. The Mariners last made the playoffs in baseball in 2001. But we're talking about this postseason drought of before social media. This is before MySpace, before YouTube, Facebook, like all this stuff. That's how long it's been for Cleveland and the Browns with the playoffs. And the fact that that is on the table right now, I really think that this team is playing how many expected them a season ago entering the 2019 season. Because remember, in August 2019, before the start of the season, the odds makers had the Browns as the favorite to win the AFC North. But it shows how competitive this division was. The Ravens were coming off a 14-2 season in 2019. And a lot of them thought, they're going to be the top of the AFC North again. And I said, whoa. Let's backtrack here for just a second. Since 2002, when the NFL reconfigured its divisions, no AFC North team has won the division in 3 consecutive years, which is what the Ravens were trying to do entering this season. They ran the ball at a historic rate last season and had the most rushing yards of any team in NFL history. You knew there was going to be some regression there. Future Hall of Fame guard Marshall Yanda retires. They have other injuries on the offensive line. People are going to have a target on Lamar Jackson given the fact that he played as an MVP a season ago. And so they're struggling right now at 6-4, and the Browns are actually ahead of them in the playoffs. I can't wait to see how this Browns team plays in the rematch, not only against the Ravens, but the rematch against the Steelers as well. And to see, okay, is there an improvement from the first time that they played their AFC North foes earlier this season?
Yeah, and that final game of the season for the Browns is against the Steelers. So maybe this is a game for playoff seeding. I mean, it should be, given the Browns don't have a total collapse, which I don't foresee happening. But that could be a playoff preview. Maybe right now the Steelers are on pace to get the lone bye in the AFC this year with that new format, but maybe the Chiefs catch them. This is a huge game. It could be first of 2 back-to-back games for them. So it's going to be a nice test. And like you said, it's just going to be fun to see how they do against these teams after 2 horrible games earlier in the season. You look at the Raiders loss. It was rainy. It was windy. It was tough to stand outside. But those 2 division losses do stand out. And you go, okay, maybe the Browns aren't as good as their record shows. But if they play well against the Ravens on Monday night in a few weeks, take that into the Steelers, maybe the Browns enter the playoffs as the team, like you said, that odds makers thought they were going to be a year and a half ago when they were Super Bowl favorites, which was insane. But now they actually do have a chance to, get in the playoffs, pick up a playoff win. And once you're in the playoffs, look what the Titans did last year competing. So anything could happen. And the Texans took a huge lead on the Chiefs. The list goes on. So if they can do well in these 2 divisional games, it's going to totally change the narrative of what they can do moving forward.
I'm so happy you mentioned the Titans, because what was their recipe a season ago? We're going to ground and pound with Derrick Henry, and the Browns have a pretty good guy in their own right in Nick Chubb and then Kareem Hunt. Whichever one you want, you can keep both of them fresh because they're a duo, they're a tandem. In how the Browns dominate the line of scrimmage with upgrades on the offensive line, which you have to give credit to Andrew Berry and company for upgrading this offseason. That was a huge priority for this Browns front office. And so you've got that, and then it's playing stout defense on the other side of the ball, which is what the Titans did on their run to the AFC Championship a season ago. And so, okay, this Browns team could get Myles Garrett back, a potential defensive player of the year candidate. He did not play this afternoon, but you'd imagine if you don't get him back next week against Jacksonville, you would the following week, just depending if he can clear COVID-19 protocols. But that is the recipe for success late in the season when, okay, it's a line of scrimmage game. It's not as glamorous. You don't have, the Ferraris of all the wide receivers on the outside and where we're so focused on fantasy football, especially once we get into the playoffs. It's a lot closer, and you've got to figure out different ways to win. But it's not, we're just going to air it out and play a shootout, especially late in the season. Later in the winter, when the weather changes and it gets colder out, it's a different style of football. And that's why you tend to see cold weather teams. You look at the last 20 years, there are some exceptions to this rule, but the cold weather teams tend to win Super Bowls. And so you make the comparison to what the Titans did a season ago. I think that's the recipe for the 2020 Browns entering the back half of the season and headed into the postseason for their chances of success.
Yeah, I view it as long as they win, I don't care how. When you try to project it forward, say, well, what if they get in the playoffs and the opponent's different? It says it doesn't matter as long as they win. It's kind of like a baseball team. The Indians are great at this, of pulling off 2-1 victories. Just they can't hit, but the pitching is good enough to win. So if the Browns get in the playoffs and they're in say a 6-6 tie at halftime, and they can't throw the ball, you say, okay, well, we're going to do what we do best and run it. And if we can't win doing what we do best, we probably don't deserve to win. So if it, like you said, if it's not as glamorous, everyone's so obsessed with stats. If Baker's throwing for 150 to 200 yards, but then you have Chubb and then Hunt each getting near 100, what's the problem? There's no problem there because you have two stud running backs. So I'm fine with it. I mean, the Browns are 7-3. There's zero reason to complain based on the history of the team. I mean, getting to 7 wins for this team is an accomplishment since 1999. It's rare. So we're talking about it, excited about it. And if they have to only run the ball moving forward, I don't care. That's what football used to be for a long time. And if they win, they win. That's all that matters.
And I know Hunt had the touchdown in today's game, and some people might say it's like, oh, he didn't have nearly as good as game as he had a week ago. And I know going into this one, it's like, oh, are they each going to rush for 100 again? And it's just like, look, a couple things here. A week ago, the Texans have the worst rushing defense in the NFL from a statistical output and allowing the most rushing yards on average of any team in the league. And then number two, when Chubb and Hunt did that a week ago, they were the first Browns duo to rush for 100 or more yards in a single game since 1966. So you're not going to get Chubb and Hunt each going for 100 yards in every single game. But again, 20 carries for Chubb today, 13 for Hunt. If you can keep both of them fresh, that's what I'm talking about. And if one is in rhythm, maybe you ride the hot hand of whichever guy's performing better. And Stefanski's had a good grasp of that this season. Moving forward next weekend against the Jaguars, I think a key is continuing to beat the teams that you should beat, and certainly Jacksonville is one of them after losing yet again this afternoon to the Steelers. They only have one win on the season, and so this is a team that could be in the sweepstakes for tanking for Trevor Lawrence. We'll see how the Jaguars finish, but they have not played well at all this season. I would certainly imagine that the Browns would be favored in this one. And that was something I was curious about going into today's game with the Browns was, okay, initially they open as a 3.5-point favorite. It goes down to 3. Myles Garrett gets ruled out. The game gets taken off the board. I don't know what ended up being headed into the 1 o'clock kickoff this afternoon. But I would certainly imagine that the Browns will be favored over the Jacksonville Jaguars, even despite the fact that they're on the road next Sunday in their Week 12 matchup.
Yeah, they're going to be huge favorites, especially after today. Steelers forced 4 interceptions. Gardner Minshew's out. Jake, I believe I'm saying it right. I've heard it Luton and Luton, so I don't know. But my point
Whoever
is,
the backup quarterback is, yeah.
He threw 4 interceptions. He went 16 of 37, which is just atrocious. They had one player, James Robinson, run the ball. The team, he had 17 carries. No one else had a rush in the game. They were having a rookie throw the ball way too many times. The Steelers had a field day with him. And that team won its opening game against the Colts. Maybe went, okay, we're a legitimate team. And now they are horrible. The weather's going to be nice, too, so the Browns can open up the playbook, maybe like they did against Washington and Cincinnati earlier in the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were – I mean, after the way the Jaguars played, if the Browns are 8 or 9-point favorites, because Vegas has seen the Browns capable of playing well in good weather, and also the odds makers aren't going to overreact to low point totals that happened in bad weather. So – I mean, it might be tricky to bet on because it's still the Browns, and I refuse to bet on the Browns ever because I'm scarred from the past of them being favored and losing. But they should be able to hold their own and pick up a double-digit victory over this just bad, very bad Jaguars team.
And I know it used to be Everbank Field. It's now TIAA Bank Field in Jacksonville. I know they've got, like, under normal circumstances, and I doubt that they're even doing this right now, but they've got, like, the pool where the fans can go and watch the game from the pool. And so this is a franchise that's really struggled really since the days of having like Maurice Jones-Drew and then before that Fred Taylor. So this is a team that's been really, really bad. And you're right, Steven, getting that week 1 win against the Colts, it's like, wait a second, is Jacksonville really that bad? They haven't won a game since then, since that opening week game. And so, again, I think this is a team where if the Jets can get a victory, which is a tall ask, but this is a Jacksonville team that could be in the sweepstakes for Trevor Lawrence. And it's not to take away from Gardner Minshew when he's healthy, but this Jacksonville Jaguars team doesn't have a whole lot of talent. They've traded away a lot of their talent that they did have on both sides of the ball. And so, again, I would expect the Browns to be favored pretty heavily in today's game. I know the Steelers were like a 10.5 point favorite headed into this afternoon's matchup, and they ended up winning 27-3 in that one. And they were also at home as well. And so, I don't know. For me, this is a get-right game for the Browns and a get-right game for Baker Mayfield. So a lot of the critics that he's had, maybe Baker Mayfield can continue to establish that connection he has with his receivers and light it up a little bit, just considering that the weather conditions should be more favorable than what we've seen the last few weeks in Cleveland.
Oh, yeah. And one note on the Jaguars, they were very close to getting to the Super Bowl. What did they do? They had Blake Bortles. They said, no, he's not working out. We're going to give Nick Foles a ton of money. He gets hurt in like the first series of the season. They put Minshew in there. They, get the Minshew mania because of his mustache. They're still average. Then this year they trade Foles. So they're basically the Browns with 2 AFC championship appearances. It's the same concept. Tom Coughlin came in and essentially chased their top talent out of town. They spent years building. They get rid of Jalen Ramsey. I mean, the only guy they seemed to like was Myles Jack. And, Ngakoue wants out. It's a total mess. And now what we've seen the Browns do in the past of going, well, our plans to tank for Trevor Lawrence or, Justin Fields, but you guys were nearly in the Super Bowl. What happened? It's just mismanagement. And yeah, people sitting in the swimming pool, not even there for the game. It should be an easy win. And it's a bizarre franchise. And the success that they've had for short periods arguably makes them more frustrating than the Browns. But
thank you for correcting me. Thank you for correcting me in glossing over what I will call the Blake Bortles era sarcastically, but was really, Yannick Ngakoue, Jalen Ramsey, a defense that was very, very legitimate just a few seasons ago, and a team that very nearly beat the New England Patriots and actually had a lead in that game. But Blake Bortles and the boys couldn't quite get it done. And they've really not been the same since that AFC Championship game where it was like, oh my gosh, Jacksonville of all teams in the AFC Championship game very nearly went to the Super Bowl. So thank you for correcting me on that in the sense that just a few years ago, this Jaguars team was very formidable. Steven, any final thoughts before we sign off here on the Browns Nation Station? Again, Browns a winner against the Philadelphia Eagles this afternoon, 22-17, and the Browns improved to 7-3. But final thoughts before we sign off here.
I guess my main final thought is just that I think if you're watching these games and intently as a Browns fan or a national analyst, Baker Mayfield is looking much improved. You have to not jump all over his stats, his 12 completions today, because he was able to make, throws when it counted, get the first downs. He sailed his one potential touchdown pass, but it's not like he's sailing passes all the time while he's stepping up in the pocket anymore. So he's looking pretty good. And the fact that the running game helps him out so much is part of the formula. It's not something that should be used as a knock against him. So I'm happy with how Baker's playing, and I'm glad that there's no more, like at the beginning of the season, any talk of Case Keenum. He's just on the sidelines. There's no focus on him, and that's how it should be.
I agree. And unless Mayfield is hurt, which he's clearly not at this point in time, to where his ability is compromised as a player. So I wholeheartedly agree there. And I'm excited to see what this team does in better weather conditions next week. And Mayfield's just an easy target. I know he's in a lot of the Progressive commercials, which air nationally. And again, I know he hasn't quite played up to being the number 1 overall pick. I certainly understand that. I certainly understand he hasn't played to the level of other blue chip quarterbacks in this league. But the fact that the Browns stand at 7-3 in a position to make the playoffs for the first time in almost 2 decades, what more could you want from the guy? And I look at these talk shows on national, and he's an easy target because if you just look at the stat line, yeah, it's not there. But what is he being asked to do to win football games? And he's gotten it done so far this season. And hopefully, again, like I said earlier, I hope this next week against Jacksonville is a get-right game because you've got two tough matchups beyond Jacksonville against the Titans on the road the following week, and then the week after on Monday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, and as for the point of him being a number one pick, I also liken it to Mitchell Trubisky, that these players aren't, it's not their fault where they got picked. They're going to play up to their available talent and their ceiling. So if the Browns, take Baker number one and he's playing solid, that's really all you could ask for with your first round pick. So it's easy to say, well, he was number one and he's not playing like an elite quarterback. It's, well, he was still technically their first round pick. That's where they had the selection. And he's doing well enough to not lose. And for a team that can't even get 7 wins in most years, he's fine. And any criticism for him based on the stats is clearly people just not watching. And that's going to happen, but it's just, for once, it's not warranted. So it's nice.
Really quickly, I'll go back to your point and our point earlier about leaving points on the board, to where if the Browns did lose this game, I think then you can point to, okay, Cody Parkey's missed field goal, or okay, the overthrow of Hooper in the end zone. I think those are the things that you can point to of what you can improve upon. And yet the Browns still win this game by 5 points this afternoon against the Philadelphia Eagles. And despite the fact that they didn't have Myles Garrett, and this defense found a way. And I really give them credit in this one for having different guys step up, because this was the first time where it was just like going into this game, Myles Garrett, 9.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, both led the league entering this week of NFL football. And the next highest sack total was Sheldon Richardson with 3.5. And so going into this game, I said, who's going to be this guy on the Browns defense that stepped up? Really, if I had to give a game ball, it'd probably be to Denzel Ward, because he was everywhere this afternoon. He was a key difference maker in the win for the Browns. And that was a big question I had going in, and they answered that. I would certainly expect the Browns to get Myles Garrett back either this next week against the Jaguars or the following week, get off the COVID-19 list. And you would expect him to continue to be that player that he's been thus far this season. But that was the big question I had going into this one, and the Browns answered that in today's win.
And I'm just looking over the stats really quickly. Andrew Sendejo did lead the way in terms of tackles today. So, a nice Andrew Sendejo stat. But on a more serious note, Takitaki play one of his best games, had his biggest moment of his career. Everything seems to be going well. You get Myles Garrett back, add him to a defensive line where Vernon and Claiborne seem to be playing up to what they were brought in to be. It's all excitement, especially like heading into a matchup with one of the worst teams in football.
Yeah, can we get Vernon and Garrett on the same page to where it can just be a race to the quarterback? That's something where it's just like, if he can get 3 sacks in a game, and we know what Myles Garrett can do, let it be a race between those two dudes on the edge. That's what I want to see against Jacksonville next week. But, Steven, at this point, I am just rambling. Anything else before signing off here?
No, not just that. I'm excited about this Browns win, and I'm also excited that when I tune in next Sunday, hopefully they are not playing in the awful weather that I'm seeing out my window, so I could live vicariously through them as they're in Florida.
Check out Steven Kubitza's work on brownsnation.com. Steven, we'll both be back following next weekend's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I wish all of the Browns Nation Station listeners, and I also wish you, Steven, a happy Thanksgiving as well this upcoming week. Again, the Browns 22-17 winners over the Philadelphia Eagles. For Steven Kubitza, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for listening to the Browns Nation Station. Go give us a 5-star review. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. Again, we'll see you next week. Take care. So long, everyone, and we'll see you next time.